What if those big, chunky lights you bring to weddings didn't have to be quite so big? My name is Josh Birman, I'm a wedding videographer, and I currently use two Aputure 60Xs to film my weddings, and I absolutely love them. But they are kind of hard to travel with. This big non-removable yoke makes them kind of clunky when you're packing for air travel, plus they're pretty heavy. So seeing how incredibly small the X100 is, I got very excited. If this thing can replace my Aputure lights, that would be game-changing. I could pack so much lighter and easier for air travel. Quick disclaimer, Zhiyun gave me this X100 light to make this video, but they are not sponsoring this video. They did not pay me in any other way. They have no input or control over what I say, and they do not get to review this video before it goes live. I do also want to say that this is definitely not a long-term review. I've had this light for just over a month and I've taken it to about 3 weddings, so I haven't had a ton of hands-on experience with it at this point. If I do come across any major problems after this video goes live, I'll be sure to update the description and add a pinned comment below. So this is the Molus X100. It's a bicolor light going from 2700 Kelvin to 6500 Kelvin, and somehow it is a 100 watt light despite being absolutely tiny. Zhiyun does offer a battery grip with this light, which actually just clicks into the side like that, and now it's connected. The light also has app control, and it's luckily very simple and easy to use. Zhiyun sent me this light with their combo package, which includes the light, reflector dish, power supply, battery grip, and a Bowens mount adapter so that you can use Bowens mount modifiers with this light, although that's not really something I'll be using for shooting weddings. One thing to note, the light does not come with a ball head, so you will need to pick one up so that you can actually use it with a light stand and adjust its position. Now, like I was saying, this is a 100 watt light, which is kind of insane considering how incredibly small it is. This is my Canon R6, and they're basically the same width. And look how crazy thin this thing is. That's insane. Unfortunately, it doesn't stay quite this slim all the time. As soon as you attach the little reflector, it does get a bit bigger. And obviously, if you put on the battery, it's also gonna make it bigger. But even with these things attached, it's still so small. And the fact that you can power the light with just this is kind of crazy. All 3 pieces together weigh just 890 grams, and without the battery grip, it's just 452 grams. The almost all plastic build does contribute to how light it is, which is kind of both a good thing and a bad thing in my opinion. It being crazy lightweight is super nice, but I do wish the build quality was a little bit better. It does feel kind of cheap, and I doubt it would hold up very well if I dropped it. Not that most lights would hold up well if they were dropped. I just think I would have a little bit more confidence in it if the housing was metal instead of plastic. And furthering that kind of cheap build quality, these 2 control knobs on the side here aren't the best. They feel pretty plasticky and they wobble a little bit when you move them. I do like the feedback you get when you spin them though. I want to test the output of this thing, and more specifically, how it compares to the Aputure 60X. Okay, I've made it dark now. I'm gonna test both lights at 5600 Kelvin and at 3200 Kelvin. And we're gonna do 3 tests, one at 3 feet, one at 10 feet, and one at 20 feet. I don't actually own a light meter though, so I'm just using this app on my phone that I found for free. It's not gonna be very accurate. It's not like a scientific light meter or anything like that. But I figure if I test both lights, I'll get at least a somewhat decent rating, so we can at least compare the output on the same scale. All right, so we got the light over here at 20 feet from the wall, and I'm just gonna walk over there and use my phone to use the light meter. And we are getting, boop. And it keeps changing. Okay, we're going with a different app. You can stop rolling. All right, we got the Aputure 60X over here at 100% brightness, spot mode, and 5600 Kelvin. And we're getting 1400 lux. These are the specs that I was able to pull just from using my iPhone. At 3200 Kelvin, the X100 got 33,000 lux at 3 feet, 3500 lux at 10 feet, and 1200 lux at 20 feet. The 60X in flood mode got 12,300 lux at 3 feet, 1500 lux at 10 feet, and 570 lux at 20 feet. In spot mode, it got 68,000 lux at 3 feet, 7,300 lux at 10 feet, and 1,200 lux at 20 feet. At 5,600 Kelvin, the X100 got 41,000 lux at 3 feet, 4,200 lux at 10 feet, and 1,500 lux at 20 feet. The 60X in flood mode got 14,800 lux at 3 feet, 1,900 lux at 10 feet, and 670 lux at 20 feet. In spot mode, we got 83,000 lux at 3 feet, 8,700 lux at 10 feet, and 1,400 lux at 20 feet. From the testing, it looks like the X100 is quite a bit brighter than the Aputure when it's in flood mode. On the Aputure, I was getting 14,800 lux at 3 feet, and with the X100, I was getting 41,000 lux. So it is a lot brighter in comparison to the 60X's flood mode. And something I did notice while using these lights together at weddings, the Aputure can go a lot dimmer at the lowest setting compared to the X100. When you take the X100 from 0 to 1%, it's pretty blinding, even just going up to 1%. But the 60X feels a lot more smooth in its transition from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3. Spot mode on the Aputure was pretty consistently brighter than the X100 though. 83,000 lux at 3 feet on the Aputure versus 41,000 lux on the X100. So basically double. Interestingly, they got essentially the same score at 20 feet though, both getting about 1,500 lux. I don't know if I just tested poorly or what, but it's kind of weird. The benefit of the Aputure here is that it's got that adjustable beam angle, so when you're in spot mode, you're focusing that light into a tighter beam. If you need to shoot the light across an entire room, you don't have to spill it all over the room just to get across. You can focus it down to just that single point that you want to hit, which is super helpful on a wedding day because you can't always move the light closer or further away from your subject. So being able to zoom in and out with the light is incredible. That means you don't have to blind all of the guests around you just to reach the light all the way across the room. The X100 does not have this feature though, but that's not really a knock on the light. It's not designed the same way as the 60X. It's just that in my case, as a wedding videographer, it is something I need to consider as I'm kind of comparing the two different lights. All right, so I don't really know how to measure beam angle on these lights, so I'm just gonna point them both at the wall, and whichever circle of light is bigger, that one has a wider beam angle. All right, so the Zhiyun light is, it's this big. Look at that. And the Aputure light is this big. It kind of looks like the Zhiyun light is wider. What happens if I do this? Oh yeah, it does look wider. And these are both 3 feet from the wall. Yeah. Yeah, this Zhiyun light is definitely wider. Yeah, that's impressive.
What's impressive is my timing.
Woo! You can't do that, can you?
Just post-production.
When it comes to powering the X100, you've got a few options. The easiest one is the optional battery grip. It literally just clicks into the side. You're done. And you can recharge it via a USB-C port on the side. There's a DC power jack on the bottom of the light, and you can use the included power adapter to power the light through that. The power adapter is pretty chunky though, so I wouldn't really recommend it. There's also a USB port here on the bottom right next to that DC jack. You will need a 100 watt USB-C charger that supports power delivery to get full output on this light. My 65 watt Anker charger with power delivery was still able to power it. I just couldn't go above 65% output. Having that USB port on the bottom is really handy because you can also use V-mount batteries to power the light. Unfortunately, there aren't a ton of V-mount batteries that have 100 watt USB power delivery, and the ones that do are either quite expensive or they have a very large capacity, which makes them harder to fly with. So I did some research and I found this thing. It's a D-tap to USB-C 100 watt power delivery adapter. So you can plug this end into any D-tap port on any V-mount battery and get 100 watt power delivery in or out. There's a ton of brands that make these on Amazon, but I picked up the Birman one and it's been working very well for me. I think this V-mount with USB adapter situation is probably the best option for powering this light. It is a little clunky because you're dealing with a V-mount battery and a cable running up to the light, but you're gonna get much better battery life compared to using the battery grip. The battery grip would totally be my go-to power solution for this light, but the battery life is really terrible. I did a bunch of battery tests and here's all the data I collected. The X100 with the battery grip lasted 31 minutes at 100%, 57 minutes at 50%, and 1 hour and 38 minutes at 25%. Recharge time on this battery grip was 2 hours and 19 minutes with my 65 watt charger. I also tested this light with a 190 watt hour V-mount battery, which is a huge battery. It only lasted 1 hour and 38 minutes though at 100%, 3 hours and 9 minutes at 50%, and 5 hours and 26 minutes at 25%. I don't actually own a 99 watt hour V-mount battery, so I can't test the battery life with that capacity of battery, but just doing some math, we should get a very close number. So at 100% with a 99 watt hour V-mount battery, it should last 58 minutes, 1 hour and 38 minutes at 50%, and 2 hours and 50 minutes at 25%. For comparison, here's the battery life of the Aputure 60X with that same 190 watt hour battery and a theoretical 99 watt hour battery. With the 190 V-mount, it lasted for 2 hours and 12 minutes at 100%, 5 hours and 29 minutes at 50%, and it should last for about 11 hours at 25%, but I didn't take the time to test that. And with a 99 watt hour battery, it should last for 1 hour and 8 minutes at 100%, 3 hours and 12 minutes at 50%, and 5 hours and 43 minutes at 25%. As much as I love the compact size of the light with the battery grip, the battery life is just bad. It sucks. 30 minutes at 100% is almost nothing. Not that you're going to be using it at 100% for your weddings all the time, but still, it's pretty bad. I was actually pretty surprised with the results from the V-mount test. It chewed through my big 190 watt hour battery very quickly. It is more powerful than the Aputure 60X in flood mode, but I didn't expect it to burn through the battery quite as fast as it did. At 100% on both lights, you're getting like 35 extra minutes with the 60X, and at 50%, it's no contest. The Aputure light has an extra 2 hours and 20 minutes on the X100. Aside from the disappointing battery life of this battery grip, there is one other potential issue I found. I happened to notice that on B&H that this battery grip exclusively has 1-star reviews, and all of them mentioned that this grip completely stopped working after about 3 weeks to a few months of use. I also checked Amazon and got the same thing. A bunch of reviews saying that this battery essentially broke after a few months of use. Now, I personally haven't had this issue. My battery grip still works just fine, but this is pretty concerning. I reached out to Zhiyun to see if they had any comment on this issue, and they told me that wall chargers with fake USB power delivery specs may be to blame. Apparently, some fake USB PD chargers have anti-static issues which could kill this battery as you're charging it. They said to make sure your wall charger supports standard power delivery protocol and is a quality charger. I've been using a 65 watt Anker charger and have yet to run into any issues, but I've also only had this thing for about a month. Zhiyun did say if you have any issues with your battery grip to reach out to this email address. But even with that explanation that Zhiyun gave, it is still pretty weird to me how many people have had issues with this battery. Fellow YouTuber Kern Sheldon also had one of these batteries die, which he mentions in this video I'll link above. With the poor combination of battery life and the weird battery dying issues, and the price tag of $120 per battery, I think I'd just stay away from this battery grip. I absolutely love the idea of it. It's so compact, which is amazing, but it doesn't really live up to what it feels like it should be. I've taken this guy to a few weddings now, one of them a destination wedding, and here are my thoughts. I think this light works very well for weddings. It has a good spread. Even when I put this thing very close to the dance floor, I was still able to cover about 75% of it, which is pretty much the same as my Aputure lights. And with it being such a bright light, I really only needed to use it at like 10 to 25%. Of course, that was when the sun had gone down completely and there was very minimal ambient light. If you were trying to combat other light sources, you definitely need to pump up the output. I think this thing is great for weddings, with one caveat, and that is that you need to get this light relatively close to your subject for it to be effective. Because you can't focus the beam like you can with the 60X, you have to rely on physically moving the light. So it's definitely not as versatile as the 60X, but for lighting up the dance floor or anything where you can get the light a little bit closer to your subject, this thing performs just as well as the 60X. It's also worth mentioning the battery situation. That battery grip is not really a viable option for weddings, so you will either need to plug in a wall power or get a V-mount. I think the best setup for battery life to size to price is going to be getting a 99 watt hour V-mount with that D-tap to USB adapter. You can find quite a few mini 99 watt hour V-mount batteries for around $150 per battery. Grab 2 of those, a V-mount clamp, and you're good to go. Even one battery might be fine if you're only using the light between 10 to 25%. I wouldn't really call the battery situation a drawback. It's just something to keep in mind when you go to buy this. By far, the biggest benefit of this light is how tiny it is. This thing is incredible for traveling. It's so easy to fit this thing in your bag, and unlike the Aputure 60X, it doesn't have any glass elements, so the risk of breaking during transport is way lower. Plus, with it being so lightweight, it's absolutely perfect for those tiny little travel light stands that we usually have to bring when flying. Now, there's no doubt that the Aputure 60X is a better light for weddings. It's way more versatile with the adjustable beam angle, and it's got better battery life. But for travel weddings where you need to pack light, this seems like a great option. I think my ideal setup would be to use 1 to 2 of the X100s and 1 Aputure 60X. That way I still have the focusable light if I need it, but I don't have to pack 2 or 3 of them. However, if you did need to pack super light and the Aputure wasn't an option, these lights would still work great by themselves. Just to quickly touch on pricing, the light by itself with this little reflector dish is $250. $150 for a 99 watt hour V-mount battery and $70 for the cable, clamp, and adapter. You're looking at about $470 for the whole thing. The Aputure 60X is $420 just for the light itself, and then you need to buy batteries on top of that. So it's not like a cheap light, but it's also not expensive. And you could totally power it just off of wall power if you wanted to with the provided cable, and then you're only spending the $250 just for the light. I think this light is really solid for people traveling for weddings. The extremely small size and how lightweight it is such a big benefit when traveling. It also means that you can bring light stands that aren't as heavy duty or as big because of how lightweight this thing is. This light will definitely be staying in my kit. That being said though, I still prefer my Aputure 60Xs over this. The adjustable beam angle is so nice at weddings, and the longer battery life is really great. Not that it's a deal breaker at all, but it is nice with the Aputure lights that you have the option to attach the V-mount directly to the side of the light, versus with the X100, you do have to run that cable to and from the battery. I really wish that this battery grip was better. I wish that I could power the light for longer. The fact that even at 50% power, it can't make it a whole hour is pretty disappointing. I love the design of just being able to click this on and you're good to go. It's a real bummer that it doesn't actually power the light for that long. Well, this is the Zhiyun Molus X100 light. I'm very excited to keep using it at weddings, and let me know what you guys think of it in the comments. Okay, bye.